Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, and today I am joined for the first time by my friend Jose Lopez. What's up, Jose?
Hey, how's it going, Patrick? Good to be with you.
Jose and I are on this Golden State Warriors group text. That's how we met. I knew like two people on there, and then I just keep texting it, and I don't really know. There's just a bunch of blank numbers except for like three people. But Jose and I tended to actually really participate. So I figured like, yo, you want to come on the show and talk some stuff? Good to have you on. I want to ask you, like I ask guests every time they come on, what's your Warriors fandom like? What was it like for you coming up as a Dubs fan through like the good times, the bad times, all that jazz?
Yeah, thanks. I got to say, that group text that you mentioned, that thread, that's one of those things. I think it kind of grew out of COVID a little bit. At least that's how I think about it. That's when I became very active in it. And it's a text thread with our common friend Vu Bang, and we're all pretty active on it. It's cool to have that outlet for hardcore Warriors fans. And so yeah, I've definitely enjoyed getting to know you through that, and have been a long time listener, first time caller on the program, so thanks for having me on. Your question in terms of my Warriors fan story, I think I'm a 1980s kid, born and raised in San Jose, and I grew up a fan of the Oakland Raiders, the Oakland A's, and the Warriors. So I, like, in terms of my identity, I was always very affiliated with the East Bay teams, including the Warriors. And so I think just in terms of that time in history, we had a very tortured existence with that run, right? So definitely very bright spots with the Run DMC or Run TMC rather teams, and your Spreewell era, and the ups and downs of the Chris Webber era, and just watching a lot of fun basketball, but not necessarily winning basketball. And so that a lot of miss picks, and kind of head scratching draft and management decisions. The Obviously the Mitch Richmond trade being a big kind of historical kind of footprint there. So that's the era of the team that previous to this kind of dynasty era was kind of the defining aspect of how I identify as a fan. And I think probably like you and like others who have lived through that type of history, definitely just really cherish these moments, because we know that winning basketball is not always there, and we remember those bad times, and it made these good times that much sweeter for us.
Jose, you're also the owner proprietor of ropa.com, where I'm wearing one of your shirts, which is super soft. It's a t-shirt company, so like tell folks about that.
Yeah, no, thanks. And definitely, love seeing the shirt on you. Looks good on you. It's the brand is called Ropa. Website www.getropa.com, and basically it's a Latino oriented t-shirt brand. And just being based in the Bay Area, I have a few t-shirts, including this Warrior shirt, that are affiliated with some of the local teams. But yeah, it's kind of a fun little side project. Not something that is ever going to make me rich, I don't think. It's just kind of a labor of love, but a fun project and a fun way to get some cool designs out in the world, and hope people enjoy them.
Cool. So that's get ropa ROPPA.
That's right.
.com, right?
GETROPPA.com.
Okay. All right. So I brought you on because we were texting back and forth, and there's something that's just been like eating at me, because I was really, really into the draft this summer. And I noticed, to me, okay, like the top 5 prospects in this year's draft, they kind of have an analogous pair in the 2020 draft, which is kind of strange to me, right? Like basically like at each position, there's somebody who was top 5 in my opinion, right? I'll make this pretty clear. So I'm going to just say that at point guard, you're looking at Cade Cunningham versus LaMelo Ball. At shooting guard, you're looking at Jalen Green versus Anthony Edwards. At another guard position, you're looking at Jalen Suggs versus Tyrese
Mm-hmm.
Halliburton. Center, Evan Mobley versus James Wiseman. And at wing position, either Jonathan Kuminga or Scotty Barnes versus Patrick Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And some people might debate who the top 5 in the 2020 draft were, but to me, I like those
Yeah.
guys. So I wanted to go through some of this stuff and figure out like who's better out of these, right? Like who would actually win in a 5-on-5 with these lineups. I preface this with obviously we haven't seen any of these 2021 guys play in the NBA. So like I want you to pick a team based on these comparisons. So like Cade Cunningham versus LaMelo Ball. Who would you take?
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, and I'll say I really like, I hadn't thought about it in that way in terms of, lining up these guys by position this way, but it really kind of lines up well in my opinion. So I like the thought exercise. And to your question, as between Melo and Cade Cunningham, I think it's clearly Cade there. If you just look
Mm,
at, the Cade, I think, and I'll say just spoiler alert. My take is generally that the 2021 draft class is going to be better long term than the 2020 class, and to me
hmm
that starts with Cade himself, in my opinion. Just looking at his size in measurables, he's essentially kind of a point forward, just given the size that he has, and he just has so much versatility and sophistication in his moves. I think he's just on the offensive end, just kind of a plus across a bunch of different categories, whether it's playmaking, his finishing at the rim. I think I like a lot better than Melo. He's not the passer that Melo is, but he's still a really good passer. And then I think he can just play down low a little bit, and I think that's a real plus when you consider his size and the fact that he's probably going to go up against smaller players. I think that's one aspect of his game, is the ability to score down low and finish down low with explosiveness and strength, that I think he really has a huge advantage over Melo. I think Melo is much more of a floater guy when he gets into the paint, and I really like how Cade finishes. And then in terms of defensively, I don't think it's very close. I think Cade just has a better frame. He's just kind of a little bit more filled out, than Melo is. Melo feels like a little bit of a skinnier dude, and that may change, but I do think today, just a snapshot. I think Cade, even as an incoming rookie, is a little bit more of a plus defender than Melo is, even going into a sophomore season. So that's how I think about it. I think, and I'll make this caveat that to a certain extent, this conversation is almost like a redraft conversation, or a chance to kind of reflect on, specifically for the 2020 guys, how we thought about them, coming into the rookie season, and how we think about them now. And I'll be the first one to admit that I was really off on LaMelo. I was not particularly high on him coming in, and I'll gladly take the L there, because I think the joy with which he plays is just so evident, and he's so fun to watch. I didn't see that, from the clips that I saw of him, playing in Australia, and I was probably a victim of just being like, oh, I'm not sure, he's got this, super hyper vocal pops, and like, he's kind of in the shadow of his older brother a little bit, and I just didn't see like the kind of eye of the tiger, kind of, to use a cliche in terms of just a killer instinct. But man, he is raw out there, and I just love how makes his teammates better. Like I said, the joy, like he's having fun out there, and I think he takes a lot of enjoyment in making his teammates better, and making the pass, and the extra pass. His court vision, I think, is like off the charts, elite. Just seeing almost 360 degrees of the floor, and he's a lot of fun to watch for those reasons. And I think his highs
hmm
in terms of passing and court vision are probably higher than than anything that Cade does. But in my mind, I think Cade is just a little bit more well rounded, particularly when you bring in the defense. And I just like my if you're gonna look to whether it's a point guard or point forward type of player, I like somebody who really finishes strong at the rim. And I think Cade is a little bit
Mhm.
better on that side of the ball.
That's a really good analysis, man. Yeah, I actually tend to agree with a lot of that. I personally would take Cade. The ability that Cade has to do a lot more things on the court is he's excellent at a lot of
Hmm.
things. Whereas I think LaMelo is amazing at passing, distribution, that flair. I think Cade can give you more, and he might be a better player to build around in general. You could move him around the
Hmm.
court, 1 through 3 at least. Whereas Lamelo, he's a point guard. His shot will go in sometimes, but it's improved. But Cade is still a better shooter. And in terms of the passing, yeah, definitely Lamelo has shown more flair. But man, I don't know if you saw that OK State team that Cade played with, but those guys were bad, man. They were rough.
Yeah.
I saw. I mean, if you watch them in the tournament, that final game that they lost, I was like, why aren't they passing Cade Cunningham the ball? They're all trying to make a name for themselves or something. It was tough, but obviously you can't go wrong right now with Lamelo or Cade. But yeah, I lean Cade.
Yeah, that's so funny you mentioned that because I actually had a similar thought in some of those games because it kind of reminded me of the Ben Simmons LSU team where it was just
Mm.
like you have to like see past the teammates kind of performance and try to isolate it and be like, all right, this guy he's special. And I think you know we can have a Ben Simmons debate sometime, but I do think that yeah at the college level because I think we kind of see that case a little bit differently, but yeah, at the college level, I think there's some similarities there. Also with Ant and in Georgia, actually, another guy that we'll be discussing, where it just didn't have the supporting cast. And to your point, uh, I did think in some of those games, I felt like his teammates might have been like, "Hey, this is my chance. I know that I'm going to have a national TV audience. I'm going to go get mine, right?" And it just, maybe that was just my read, or
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, let's go there. I mean, he's next on my list. I mean, I think him and Jalen Green, I pair
Mhm.
them. They're both two guard wings. I know this can be a guard heavy team regardless, but Jalen Green, Anthony Edwards, who you got?
This one's tough for me. This one's really, really tough for me. I will say that I didn't watch the Ignite team super closely throughout, and it was just kind of maybe it was just me. I don't know what package you had to have to watch those games. It was I found a little bit harder to catch those games than let's say like the major college program games that are always on ESPN. So I think just based on the clips that I've seen of Green, he seems like a little bit more like a well-rounded, like polished, all-around player. And maybe it's just me, but Ant, going back to his college days where I felt like just elite off the charts athleticism and like the kind of guy that especially on the offensive end just has that one speed kind of a la Russ, right? He's just gonna like force the ball down your throat sometimes, and he has the athleticism even at the NBA. Like he definitely showed that at like the athletic edge versus college competition where it just almost wasn't fair. But he can even do that at the NBA level, which is nothing to sneeze at. um but I'm not crazy about the decision making. I'm not crazy about the shot. The shot looks a little flat to me, a little bit like a muscle kind of shot, which makes sense because he is such a just a strong, powerful player. um but yeah, I think overall, like I respect Ant's scoring ability. I think he's like, if you want to talk about, a guy in a clutch moment that needs to go get you a bucket, he seems like he'll be that player. Like like a Jimmy Buckets type of guy, like, not afraid of the moment, thinks he's the best player on the floor constantly. But the other side of that coin is kind of what you see with Russ a little bit, particularly in the later stages, or in the last few years, where it's like you don't always want your guy to think he's the best player on the floor, because sometimes that that leads to him taking bad shots. And I could just see that with Ant. So I think as much as he's impressive to me as a scorer, and as much as he has the physical, he's just like a physical specimen. And I think he can be a plus defender, if he puts that effort in. But you also just see him being a little bit lackadaisical on that end of the floor, not always kind of following the defensive play. So I think my sense is I'm gonna like the player that Jalen Green becomes, a few years from now, a little bit more than Ant. But I do think that, just like in terms of pure scoring, pure raw power and athleticism, Ant is probably the more gifted player. But if you ask me who to choose to start a team with, I might go with Jalen Green.
When you say Russ, I can totally see that. Is that the best case scenario or the worst case scenario, or just kind of who you kind of see him as? And we all know what Russ is like. He's a polarizing player. People love him. People don't necessarily hate him, but like they really, really point at his flaws.
It's a good question. I think if you look back to the pre-draft scouting reports, I'm looking here. I popped up, the Ringer, pre 2020 draft guide. Their kind of ceiling cases was Depot, which I kind of see.
Mm,
And maybe the Russ thing is my own thing. It was just, I think it came as a function of tracking Ant, because, obviously as a Warriors fan, and looking at how the top three picks in the 2020 draft performed, I was just, staying, staying abreast of, what the Wolves were doing because of the impact on our draft prospects, right? And so I
hmm
ended up watching a fair amount
Yeah.
of Wolves basketball, like a lot of hardcore Warriors fans did this year. And that's what I saw.
I'm super familiar with all the writers.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There you go. So yeah, it was like every big Warriors fans like second team was was watching the Wolves, hoping they fail, right? Um, so
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the impression I got. I don't. I mean, he's so young, right? So I think
Yeah.
the part of Russ's game that makes him, kind of very debatable figure. I think it's very ingrained in who Russ is today. I think Ant, as a player, there's still a lot of story to be written there. But it's just something that I kind of see, and that's what it reminds me of. We probably, as Warriors fans, are, if we fully drank the Kool-Aid on Kerr's system, and passing basketball, and the beautiful game type of way to play, like we don't see guys like Russ in a good light. So then that probably colors when I see flashes of Russ, not just the explosive awesome plays of like you know jumping from near the free throw line to finish at the rim type of highlights, but also the ones that are just like, man, you got an open guy, you're taking kind of a wild 3-point shot. Like I don't like to see that. So that probably colors, how I look at Ant a little bit,
Yeah.
but that's just how I see it.
Did you hear that Ant may have grown like 2 inches since the
No
2020 draft?
way, dude. That's even
Right.
scarier, man.
So he might be like 6'6", I guess. This is a really tough one for me as well. Like I really like Anthony Edwards. And I actually see the Russ comps, obviously, point guard versus a shooting guard wing, but the fact that they are both extremely
Hmm.
physical, but then like you said, Ant is a lot of story to be written, but like is the decision making there, and also is the commitment to like team defense
Hmm.
there. And we have yet to see, of course, early on, can he contribute to winning as opposed to just getting stats. And Jalen Green, I mean, this is tough because Jalen Green, who I think will be the greatest Filipino basketball player of all time, um, I'm curious to see like how what his game becomes when he plays against bigger
Hmm.
dudes all the
Hmm.
time because he's so skinny And as a two guard, at first he was listed as 6'6", but I think it's been revealed that he's actually 6'4".
Oh wow.
So I do have concerns about his
Hmm.
size. My pick for this, oh man, it's funny, right? Because like there was a big question mark around a lot of the 2020 guys, right? When there was no clear favorite number one pick or no tier one guys. And in this 2021 draft, there were, in theory, so
Hmm.
many. But knowing that, I'll swing for Jalen Green.
Hey, Filipino tiebreaker, man. I like it.
I do think he will probably be better on
Hmm.
ball as well as a creator, but those are two dudes who like play the same position but have totally different body
Yeah.
types. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And I think, to your point, like best case comp, for Ant, maybe being someone like, Depot or Russ. I think one of the best case comps that you see for Jalen Green is Bradley Beal. And like,
Hmm.
and it makes sense, right? The frame is kind of similar. Obviously, Beal is, kind of, packed on a little bit of muscle, but he's still not, the biggest guy. Um, but I think that's the kind of, playmaking and scoring that you would want to see out of Jalen Green. I do think he's somebody who, potentially has that ceiling of, being the type of guy who could lead the league in scoring potentially, and not just doing it like
Hmm.
on a bad team, great stats, bad team type of dude, but really someone who's that skilled and efficient. I think part of the mental model that's hard to escape here is to know that Ant went number one, and the Jalen Green, was never like thought of as a consensus number one player. I think that title was always kind of held by Cade, and people knew that Cade going back some ways was probably going to go number one. And so I think that's where it gets tricky, at least for me, you know, to think, oh man, this guy, Ant went number one, right? He must be better. But when you just kind of put it, on paper and look at the results and how they approach the game, like personally, I'm a little bit more, aligned with what Jalen seems to bring.
But in terms of the number one stuff, though, like for a while, people were saying that the top five prospects in the 21 draft would all be the number one pick
Yeah.
if they were each in the
Yeah.
2020
Yeah.
draft. So, um, and yeah, I mean, it is tough because there's all this recency bias like going on, right? Like if it was Ant at Georgia, and that's what we knew, and then Jalen Green coming out of the Ignite and all the high school hype, then it's pretty clear,
Yeah.
right? But then seeing how Edwards has been able to score nonstop, that's what makes it such a tough call. And I lean Green even more so because he just seems to have a little bit more of that playmaking
Hmm.
ability and a lot of similarity in the sense with Cade over Melo. It's like Edwards can do some things great and he might prove to be a very well-rounded player, but like right now he is tracking potentially to be just one of those like pure scorer
Hmm.
types, right? Whereas I feel like Jalen Green could develop more, as you're saying, like the
Hmm.
playmaking, ball handling savvy, somebody who could like initiate on the regular and not just like get the ball and drive to the
Hmm.
rack and whatnot. And who knows, maybe Jalen Green will grow 2 inches in the
That's
next 8
true.
months as
That's
well. I
true.
don't know. But why does he have to be on the Rockets, man? Come on.
I know. I was just gonna say that. That was one of those things where I was like, oh, there was a lot of, another guy that we'll talk about soon here. A lot of talk of Mobley, in the last days going in,
Sure.
and I like Mobley a lot, but Jalen Green to me is really really special. So I was really rooting for
Yeah.
for the Rockets to go Mobley, just selfishly as wanting to wanting to have Jalen Green out of the West if it's not going to be with the Dubs. So
Yeah.
um, that's another way to look at it.
And it's funny though, right? Those picks were like back to back, and it was like the Rockets and the Cavs,
Hmm.
the two greatest Warriors foes of the dynasty era.
Totally.
Week 2 of football is in the books, and now it's time to review the tape and get ready for week 3 with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off another action-packed week, DraftKings is giving new customers $150 instantly when they bet $1 on any football game. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code TBPN to receive $150 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game. That's promo code TBPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Let's move on to the aforementioned Evan Mobley. So this is going to be interesting. I want to hear your take on this. So James Wiseman had mixed bag as a rookie, and you can make the argument that somebody like maybe Isaiah Stewart was a more consistent center last year, but this is not that podcast. I'm a huge believer in Wiseman. I still am. I watched every game last year. If you listen to this podcast, you know Evan Mobley was a huge prospect. James Wiseman was the number 2 pick. They played in high school against each other. But yeah, I mean, what you calling that? Who's your pick?
You know, this one is tough for me. This was probably the toughest one. I think part of it is also, you know, colored by as somebody who is super high on Wiseman and not ready to sell low on Wiseman just yet, like a lot of people have. But you know, I think it, without, you know, wanting this to be a cop out, I think, you know, it really kind of depends on roster fit in my mind. I think, you know, Evan Mobley he's a little bit more like a guard in a center's body. You know, a little bit more, you know, slider frame, but I think he's one of these guys that, and I don't know the story, but just his fluidity, his passing, makes me think he may have had like a growth spurt, and maybe he played guard like as a kid, and so he just kept a lot of that kind of two-way kind of guard, you know, skills as a part of his game. And then, you know, I think probably like the defensive, you know, gifts and talents on the shot blocking, you know, side of things, and interior kind of moves may have been added to his game later. Whereas Wiseman, to me, seems like he was always the big kid and was always the center. But being that he grew up in the era of, you know, perimeter shooting and, you know, shooting big men, I think he kind of added those elements to his game, probably, even though, like, I don't think he ever played as like with like a guard first, you know, type of mentality. And Mobley does look to me like a very, you know, like I said, guard in a center's body kind of guy. And so it depends what you're looking for. I think Wiseman, you know, if you look at, and we know that he didn't have a good season. We know that all too well. But his field goal percentage in the interior was, I think, like top 10 or so in the league. I think, at least for like the type of volume that he had in his brief season. So I think that points to somebody who's going to be able to get those buckets inside. And he's not somebody, I wouldn't describe him as like thriving on contact.
No.
But he's just good interior, right? He's good. I think those efficiency numbers don't lie. And I think for someone who's already that efficient inside at his age, that is like a really good sign to me. We can talk about, you know, how he looked on defense, and that's a very different story. We can talk about his you know, efficiency in his perimeter shooting, and that's a much different story. But he's just, in terms of a physical freak, I see Wiseman as the clear, you know, having the clear edge on that side. Like, just like his height, his frame, and moving the way that he does, like, you just don't see that every day. Like, I feel like, you know, Wiseman's, you know, the type of guy who is just a physically imposing looking dude. Like, as soon as you walk into the gym, you'll see him, and he sticks out as just like, wow, that guy is big and he moves really well, right? So I think there's still, you know, I'm high on Wiseman. I think there's a lot of story to be told there in the future. I do think, in terms of of his situation, in terms of not having the pressure to be, even the second or third, or fourth option really on a team. I think he's going to have, the ability to kind of grow into his own on this Warriors team in a way that I think Mobley's going to have a little bit more responsibility on his plate early, and we'll see how he does in that situation. But yeah, I think this one's like really, really close to call. I think if you're the type of person who wants that kind of, a new school, center, I do think Mobley has, he's a little bit more switchable on defense. I do think that he has better passing than Wiseman does. I think he has, he's just more comfortable with the ball in his hands and never looks like, the game's moving too fast for him. I think, this may be
Mm-hmm.
colored just by the fact that, Wiseman was thrown into Steve Kerr's system, and it was like a very taxing assignment on both sides of the ball for someone to be thrown into that type of uh, you know huge on switching and then huge on ball movement type of system on the offensive end, and he just didn't look like well suited for that, right? Is that a function of
Mm-hmm.
his skills and comfort level, or is that a function of him being a rookie who literally played 3 games of college total? So he hadn't really played since high school significantly. That jury is still very much out, and we'll see how he looks. I mean, he also, never mind the meniscus, but people forget that he also had that wrist. Early in the season, he had the COVID thing, right? So they didn't have the training camp because of COVID. So it was just, if you were to draw up, Wiseman's, situation, it was just particularly for big men who, I think need to have a lot of comfort, especially on the defensive end, to be able to contribute right away. Like, he was just set up to fail from the beginning, and let's not get started on whether there was any kind of rational plan that he was walking into on the coaching side. It just felt like he was just kind of thrown into the deep end and left to sink or swim, in my opinion. So not not the best environment for him to thrive. But I do think going forward, particularly with Clay coming back, and with I think the team kind of a little bit better poised to have some depth going into this year, I do think that he'll be able to plug in a little bit better. And so, very high on both of these guys. I will say, if you want, more of like the center of the future, I think you go with Mobley there.
But you're going with Wiseman.
I'm gonna have to say Wiseman. Yeah, just I'm so invested in Wiseman, and I'll say, and back to the
Yeah.
the Ant um conversation of like that mental kind of model of being like, oh, but he was the number one draft pick. Like, Wiseman, if you go back a few seasons, was kind of that consensus number one guy, right? Um, and his college career obviously didn't work out the way that you would have drawn it up, and then he had those setbacks with the wrist, with the meniscus, with COVID in his rookie season here. But maybe I just have too much like take lock from remembering Wiseman, the high school phenom a few years ago, and I still think of that guy in that way. And so in
Mm-hmm.
my mind, I like Wiseman there. But do I think you'd be crazy to pick Mobley? No, not at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I find this exercise so interesting, because it's like, obviously a big Wiseman fan, but you look at Mobley and you're like, oh man, wow, like his skill set and his abilities. But that's the thing too, right? Like, if Wiseman had played the full season at
Hmm.
Memphis, if he got in a training camp, if he didn't get hurt, like, what would he be? How would he look? And those are a
Hmm.
lot of big ifs and hypotheticals that, like, as Draymond says, if I was 7 feet tall, I'd be Anthony Davis, right? They're two different players, right? Like, you point out that Wiseman looks like a big dude who has taught himself how to shoot
Hmm.
over the years,
Hmm.
right? Whereas Mobley looks like a guy who can handle on the wing a little bit better. It just happens to be 7 feet tall. So I'm gonna go Wiseman because, like you, this is, I don't know if this is gonna turn out kind of weird because we're picking the same dudes, but I take Wiseman not just because I'm more invested in him, which obviously I am, But those flashes that he showed last year, like I believe in that, right?
Mhm.
Like, and if he can come back 100% from meniscus, which in theory he should,
Mhm.
as long as whatever happened to Jaren Jackson doesn't happen to him,
Mhm.
and he can continue to develop. Like, I like what he brings. I like his size. He doesn't seem to take contact very well, and like that's something I want to see happen.
Mhm.
And it's funny, right? I'm making this pick based on the flashes, right? And what I saw in highlight reels and breakdowns
Mhm.
from his handful of college games, which is a very, very small sample size when you consider the type of competition he played in three
Mhm.
games, right? I think he'll have more of an impact. Ah, man, that's the thing too. Like, if you look at Mobley in Cleveland, he'll get the playing time. He'll play next to Jared Allen, so he might not even have to play center.
Mhm.
He'll take Kevin Love's playing time
Totally.
eventually. Kevin Love will get bought out. Yeah, I mean, I take Wiseman. But if somebody said to you, like, hey, if the Cavs came by and said, hey, we'll trade you Mobley for Wiseman straight up, what would you do it?
That's the thing. I would do that. I would do it. Yeah. Because the thing that I was going to say is, back to my earlier point of like so much of it being dependent on the team fit. I think someone like Mobley is a much
Hmm.
better fit for the Warrior system, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Like that's
Yeah,
that's a
totally. Like
that's what makes
he's
it tough.
much
Yeah.
more switchable. I think he could do like a little bit of that, kind of Dre, kind of spreading the ball from the elbow type of activity. I see Mobley
Hmm.
as better suited for that. Whereas like Wiseman would get the ball on the perimeter and just look a little bit lost sometimes. It was just like, like a ball stopper on offense
Yeah.
sometimes. So I think
Yeah.
that skill set, like I said, fits a little bit better with the modern NBA, fits a little bit better with the system that that the Warriors have. And, but I do think that Wiseman's physical upside is greater. And I think his ability
Hmm.
to be dominant at what he does well is better than Mobley, in my opinion. Like I see
Yeah.
like best case, for Mobley is like Chris Bosh, which obviously Hall of Fame
Hmm.
player, like amazing, amazing player. Um, and people used to compare a Wiseman to Chris Bosh too. I think that's kind of like maybe like the go-to comparison for like a big man who's not a complete stiff that you want to like,
Right.
be positive about. One
Yeah.
take that really stuck with me was actually Clay's dad, Michael Thompson, who's I'm sure he's a announcer for the Lakers, and he had a take, and this was I want to say it might have been before the meniscus or maybe just after, but he's also very high on Wiseman, and obviously has inside access to info uh, by virtue of his son being on the team, but his take on Wiseman best case was David Robinson. I remember, and that
Right.
that stuck with
Yeah.
me. And it's one of those things like, hey, who do you want between David Robinson and Chris Bosh, right? But um, and obviously two amazing players, but I mean, peak David Robinson was just dominating like his era of basketball, and
Hmm.
I think that Wiseman has the athletic ability to do that. And then this is kind of immeasurable and like intangible kind of stuff, but he seems like a smart dude, right? He seems like he cares and wants to get better. Sometimes it seems like he cares too much, like he gets down on himself when like Dre and Steve Kerr chewing him out, which I don't like, but I'll take that over like a lackadaisical dude any day.
Right.
And
Right.
and this is dumb, but like even the fact that he learned Mandarin, is like that doesn't seem like an easy thing to do. That seems like something you have to work hard at. And I think that, speaks to just someone who sticks with things, right? And will be willing to persevere and put the work in. So, all of that, maybe it's just like a homer kind of thing. And I'm trying to be as fair as possible in saying that, Mobley might even fit better into, this specific team today. But in terms of the upside that I'm more excited about, I would say it still goes with Wiseman.
I don't know if I'm going to sound like I'm just waffling back and forth because it is hard, and this is not about like hot takes, right? Like if the Cavs said, "Hey, we'll give you Mobley straight up," it's like, oh wow! All of a sudden, I start imagining Mobley being able to fluidly
Mm-hmm.
pass in the Warrior system, whereas, like you pointed out, when Wiseman gets the ball, sometimes he pauses. He's, like the Warriors, obviously, they want you to do something when you get the
Mm-hmm.
ball. Don't hold it too long. Don't think too much. Just read,
Mm-hmm.
react. If this is there, then do it. If not, then do something else. And again, like I think Wiseman has the ability to, and so all the things that we saw physically from him, it's the mental side that I believe he has, right? And not just intelligence, that's obvious, but like the and I've spoken about this before, like just that
Yeah.
will and that
Yeah.
desire and that dog and
Yeah.
that
Grit.
fight. He is yeah, he is like a physical specimen, but he would get bodied by people who were smaller
Mm-hmm.
than him, right? And that is my biggest concern. I mean, Mobley is just skinny as hell, and he's going to get
Yeah.
bodied by everybody. But that's my thing with Wiseman. Seems like a great kid, good dude. He's gonna speak Mandarin and be a yogi someday, maybe. Who knows? But this is definitely a homer pick on my part because I've talked so much and I've read so much, and I 100% believe in James Wiseman as long as he can show that he has that fight, right? Like he would get frustrated with himself, and that happens all the time. I get it. And he's like 19, 20 last season,
Mm-hmm.
but like I didn't like seeing the frustration where he looked like really sad,
Yeah.
you know, like where his face would look like somebody knocked his ice cream cone out of his hand or something. I didn't like that, like, so that's the dog I want to see. And if he has that, then to me, like, uh, as great as Mobley can be, I love Wiseman's
Mm-hmm.
potential. And also it's because, as you know, during my Warriors fandom, we've never had a center of this type
Yeah.
before. And just having like a big, bruising, physical potential all-star center in best case
Mm-hmm.
scenario, right? And like we've always had like these stiffs, these dudes who just kind of are big bodies who don't have much skill, don't scare anyone, can't jump very
Mm-hmm.
high. I want to see this, and that definitely colors my choice here because
Mm-hmm.
what I saw from him last year, I think he can deliver more of. And it's ironic that he had way more pressure last year and this year because everybody has set the bar so low for him.
Yeah.
He'll still have a ton of pressure. All eyes will be on him, but people will expect less from him. It's like when you go watch a movie and everybody says, "Oh my god, this is the best movie. You have to watch it." You'll go in, you'll be like, "It's okay."
Yeah.
Where somebody will say like, "Yeah, it's not that good. This is the worst movie you've ever seen." And you go in, and you're like, "Yeah, actually, it's pretty good." So last year, it's like this is like the Giannis AD prototype hybrid.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't very good. And then
Yeah.
this year it's like, oh my gosh, he is Patrick O'Brien. No one's really said this, but like he is overrated and doesn't know how to play basketball. And then this year he'll be like, wow,
Hey, it's not
he's
bad.
pretty damn good. So that's what I think is going to happen. But I'll take Wiseman. People can criticize me for it because it's such a homer pick, but I think there is empirical evidence to support that.
No, I hear you. And I know that's a common recurring theme. The drought of Warriors big men, and is something that you've talked about a lot on this program, a conversation that I've enjoyed. The one thing I'll add, and it's something that sticks with me and colors how I see Wiseman, is I have a buddy, and he played D1. Won't name drop him here, but one of the things that this is years ago, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, we're talking. I don't remember who we were talking about, but one thing that he told me that has always stuck with me is that a lot of big men don't like to play basketball, and his take was that there's so many guys who just they're 6'2" or whatever in like the seventh grade, and they're constantly the biggest kid, and it's just like this natural kind of assumption that like, hey, you hoop, you hooper, and the coaches kind of salivate when that big kid is coming into their high school, and they're instantly the big man. And at least the way that we used to play basketball when we were kind of coming of age, the big men were kind of like the center of no pun intended, but just the center of the offense, right? That like the plays ran through the big man a lot of times. And so just the pedestal that the big man was on, particularly in the pre kind of heavy 3-point shooting kind of modern era of basketball, I think it leads to like those kids in practice being kind of tagged as basketball players very early on. And what my buddy was saying is a lot of those kids, they just kind of do it because it's assumed that they have to play basketball because they're so tall, and they don't necessarily
Yeah.
always love playing and love the game. And then some of them, it's kind of like thankless work too, to be the defensive anchor. And then especially as basketball has become more perimeter oriented, now it's kind of a thankless job on top of it, right? Because unless you're shooting from outside, you're not getting like the funnest shots, right? And
Hmm.
so it's one of those things that when you do see somebody like Wiseman, who's clearly always been the biggest kid, on the floor, back to when he was in grade school, probably, but he still, cares about getting better and putting the work in. And, he had famously was working with KG to improve his game. And so, I see that, and that conversation that I had with my buddy, over a decade ago now kind of sticks with me. And all of that is to say that when you do have a big man who cares about getting better, I think that's a pretty unique thing.
Did that thing with KG actually happen? Because I thought, like, it's weird, right? Because once he got hurt, you're like, oh, it's not going to happen. But then Bob Myers in some interview said they were still going to meet up. But I have no idea. I didn't hear any reporting about it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I was based it off of, maybe it was like a planned thing, but so I'm not sure if that happened, or maybe it'll still happen as soon as he's able to do heavy workouts
Yeah.
again. But it's just one of those things that it's
Yeah.
like, you're taking on extra work and doing extra stuff. That's a good sign in my book.
When I heard that he was going to hang out with KG, I was like, yes, that is the dog. That is like the
Oh
epitome of
yeah.
dog. So like
Oh yeah.
get a little bit of that. Any kind of osmosis transference of dogness, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be perfect. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's what he needs a little bit more of. But yeah, yeah. All right. Okay. So we pretty much have the same team going so far. All right. Well, that seems like a good place to stop. Be sure to tune in to part 2 of this podcast a little later on. This has been another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Patrick Epino, EPINO, or at Oakland Warriors. Be sure to check it out at oaklandwarriors.com. And please go check out some of Jose's stuff at GetRopa, GetRoppa.com. There's some nice shirts there, really soft. Highly recommend. The Oakland Warriors podcast is produced by National Film Society and is a part of the Basketball Podcast Network. That's it.
Music in this episode provided by Paper Sun. Special thanks to Paul Amardo for production support. See you next time.